My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. What is up, everybody? And it's great to be back after a long Labor Day. I always want to say Memorial Day, but everybody gets that mixed up. But it's Labor Day, a long Labor Day weekend, and a drive down from Chicago. It was an incredible week last week. If you didn't get to hear those episodes, go back and listen to the episodes from last week where I was in Will County with the Will County Republican Committee, led by George Pearson, and it was just amazing. What George and everybody's doing there is what should be copied by the rest of the country. I mean, they are pushing forward, and they're just great people. They understand the Constitution. They understand what's going on. And if, I know we all hear about the corruption in Illinois. It's usually Chicago politics is what we hear about. But I will be honest with you. I have been to Washington, D.C. a lot. I've lived in New York now for over 15 years, going on 16 years. I have never seen political corruption like I see in Illinois. It's rampant. And, I mean, take, for instance, this is a name that most people outside of Illinois have never heard of, Michael Madigan. But as I learn about the politics there, this guy has been the Speaker of the House. Well, first of all, he's been in politics for a long time. We're talking about since the 80s, okay? He's been in politics. But in 1983, he became the Speaker of the House in Illinois, in their House of Representatives. He's been the Speaker of the House ever since. How is that possible for somebody to be the Speaker of the House in a state in their politics since 1983? This is the problem right here, folks. This is the problem with politics in the United States. We need, and see, I don't like saying that we need term limits, because to be honest with you, if we had somebody in there, I mean, to an extent, listen, since 1983, yes, that should not be allowed. But I wouldn't, if somebody is really doing an incredible job, which, let's be honest, I don't really know that many people who do incredible jobs in politics. But let's say they were like just destroying it in D.C. and doing amazing work. I wouldn't want to limit those people, but the catch-22 of that is, if we could eliminate the majority of the people in politics in Washington, D.C., we could probably change a lot in this country. But this is the worst example I've ever heard of this. The same position, Speaker of the House in a state since 1983. What are these people smoking up there? It is, and this was just one of the things that I've heard. I heard about mayors that were dealing drugs, mayors that were on their second DUI. I heard about chiefs of, this is a bad one, sheriffs, and this isn't just in Illinois. This is all over the country, but and I talked about this a little bit last week. Will County Sheriff's Department is ran by a leftist, and he's not backing the Republican candidate, even though he was at that department. Nick Ficarello, who's just an amazing guy. He was also interviewed him last week. The sheriff is putting all his weight behind a former Democrat state senator who has talked about defunding police. How is this possible? And what's even more crazy is all the people that I met in Illinois. You can see I'm really upset about it because my voice is cracking. But all the people that I met in Illinois, they don't see eye to eye with this stuff. I don't know who's voting these people in. It's like John McCain on the Republican Party out in Arizona. I've been to his district when he was in office. I didn't meet one person that voted for him. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I didn't meet them when I was speaking at the Republican Club in Arizona. I didn't meet anybody that voted for John McCain. In fact, they couldn't stand him. But these people keep getting elected, and it's not just there. I mean, in Arizona, I mean, how does the Portland City Council, during all this stuff that's going on, right, all of the murders, of Trump, a Trump supporter, the riots that have been going on, I mean, literally for 3 months, destroying the city. People can't go out anywhere. Yet the city council takes a 2-week break during all of it. Listen, if that doesn't clue you in a little bit on where the Democrats are, and if you're a liberal and you're listening to this, you need to pause for a second. I give plenty of criticism to the Republican Party. I even said it when I was speaking. If you don't believe me, go look on Facebook Live, and you'll see when I gave the speech in Will County, I criticized the Republican Party. I think it's ran the National Republican Party, and many of the people across this nation that are in the Republican Party in positions in state governments where not just the politicians, but the people who run, who funnel the power through and can say yay or nay on a candidate, those people are establishment people. They've ruined the one party, the party of Abraham Lincoln, that could actually save this country. I hold them directly responsible, the establishment people. One time I was down in Florida's 21st district, and I was talking to these two individuals. Sat down and had a little powwow with them. They wanted to talk to me after I spoke there. They know who they are if they're listening to this. And when I started talking about the establishment and how corrupt it is, they had their complaints about one particular person who was like the funnel where all the power had to go through, and they said he was terrible and this and that. And I kept talking about establishment. And finally, the wife says, but we're the establishment. We are the establishment of the Republican Party in Florida. And I looked at her, I said, that's not a good thing to say. That's not something you brag about. Needless to say, it didn't go over well. But when you look at this stuff, and if you're liberal and you're listening to this, I criticize them. Why? Because I'm critical, because that's where I'm a conservative. I believe in slow change. I believe it's not broken, don't fix it. And I believe the Constitution, the way it is written, is perfect. In fact, the Constitution fixed itself not where it had to be changed, where things had to be amended so that everyone got the rights that are in there. See, that's the difference between also the left and how they want to tell you how the Constitution should be changed. They want to change it, not amend something so to make sure that everybody gets the right. They would rather change the rights and make sure that people get less rights. If you're liberal, you need to be listening to this, because when you look at where the destruction is happening in the country, it's happening in Democrat-led cities. It's happening in Democrat-led states. It's not happening where Republicans are at. And after having talked to numerous people who have been to these riots, don't kid yourself, they're not protests, these riots all over the country, the same people in the same dress, the same uniform, the same job titles. You got your security people, you got your medics, you got all these different people. They show up, they're being flown. I talk to people who work for the airline industry. They see them on the planes all the time, flying wherever there's one of these incidents, quote unquote incidents, where police are involved. Yes, George Floyd was murdered. George Floyd was also on a lot of drugs. And that I'm absolutely positive they had something to do with him dying. But the procedures that were used by the police when George Floyd died were wrong. Once you're in custody, once somebody is in custody and they're cuffed and the fighting, and you've gotten him cuffed and so you've subdued the individual, it's now your job as an officer to ensure their safety, not just sit on them. You can hog tie people, turn them on your side, whatever you got to do to get them to where they can still breathe, they're still alive, but they're not running afoul. Now, I will tell you, this is a perfect example of where no matter what I say or criticize or anybody else says or criticizes, things can always go awry. There's a Florida man, there's a whole thing you can put a certain date in and put Florida man, you'll see your craziest stories. But a Florida man dies after escaping custody. He was cuffed. Right? It's now the officer's job to ensure his safety, but the guy wasn't having that, so he broke loose, took off running. See, this is why the George Floyd case and all these other cases where people aren't armed or they're cuffed, and they, like the guy in Rochester, New York, who spat on officers. First of all, he was naked, okay? The guy was on PCP. He was running around when it's freezing outside and fought police, tried to take their gun and spit on him and saying he had COVID. So they subdue him. They put a thing over his head that's supposed to prevent him from spitting on the officers. Now, this is in March when nobody knew the reality of what COVID was about at that point. We all know that the majority of it's a lie now that was caused by the Democrat Party. Again, Democrat Party going right along with these riots. But this guy, the cops put him down. I mean, you can put people down gently, but when somebody's on PCP, you ain't doing anything gently. He then subsequently, I guess, threw up or something happened in the mask. Anyway, he asphyxiated and died. I mean, the guy was on PCP, okay? The guy was unbelievably crazy. But they're going to riot about that, right? Now, in most of these cases where they're rioting, it's because a black man or the police had something to do with a black guy, and this and that. Even if the guy's bad, like in Atlanta where he fights the cops after 40 minutes of the cops being gentlemen to the guy, he decides to fight them, take their taser, and try to shoot him with a taser, and he got killed. It was a good shoot as far as I could see. I didn't see anything in there from my law enforcement experience at the time in the FBI that was not a good shoot. But they're going to go riot and burn down Wendy's. Well, in Florida, a Florida man dies after escaping custody, which means he was cuffed, but then he jumped into the bay and died. Right? So sometimes, no matter what the cops do, right or wrong, the people are going to die. This guy got away, made his own decision, jumped in the bay and died. Now, the guy is, I'm assuming, I'm looking at his picture. He looks black. He could be Dominican, but he looks black to me. His name is, let's see, what is his name here? Why can I never find anything? I looked at this 20 times, and then when I look at it, okay. Donnie Brownlow Jr., 33, made a decision to jump into the bay with handcuffs on behind his back. Now, I'm not saying, look, the guy's dead, okay? But when he was alive, he wasn't a genius. That's obvious. But the thing is, I think Black Lives Matter is probably in a quandary right now. Antifa's probably in a quandary. They don't know what to do. This guy murdered himself, and he was black. Now, are they going to go down and protest this? Probably not. You know why? I'm being facetious, but do you know why? It wouldn't matter even if he did, if a black guy pushed him in the water, because they do not, look at Chicago, they do not protest black on black crime. They don't. What they do is they use these different incidents with law enforcement to facilitate excuses to go in and tear up Democrat cities. Now, I was on Newsmax earlier today, and I was not happy with what was being reported about the thing in Rochester, because that way they made it sound as though and I watched the video, that they made it sound as though the cop just threw the guy down and just brutalized him. I didn't see anybody being brutalized. I would like to see these people in media handle somebody who's on PCP. Let's see how they handle it. I don't care if the guy's naked and sweating in the winter. People on PCP do crazy, crazy things. They're violent, and they have to be handled violently. Sometimes even when they're in cuffs. Now, I'm not saying you beat and punch them when they're in cuffs, but if they're in cuffs and they're screaming, "Give me your gun," and then spitting on the cop in March, telling them they have COVID, and the cops put the thing over their head and push him to the ground, listen, it's hard to compete with the strength and violence of somebody on PCP. But you're not going to hear that from the media. So, again, if you're liberal and you're listening to this, you need to listen. You need to listen close, because if you take a step back from your fake anger about President Trump and all this other nonsense about black lives, as though the world and the country, as though the majority of people in this country just don't care about black people. That is not the case. I've been all over this country. People they don't want this violence. They want everybody to live in harmony. They've always wanted that. Yeah, there's a few people out there, very few. There's very few people that are full-on racist and that are wanting the demise of the black community. It's not there. Go all over the country. Do what I do. Talk to people. Nobody that I've met is wishing that at all. They just want this leftist excuse to violate these cities to go away. And we've gotten to a point now, and I know there's people, their heads are blowing up right now, saying, I cannot believe he just said that he said that racism is not as extreme or systematic as we're saying. Yes, I'm saying that. I'm going all over the place. I'm meeting people. I'm meeting white people. I'm meeting black people. I'm meeting women and men, and they're all saying the same thing, that the problem is it's not that it's not fixable. It's that nobody's doing anything to fix it. The problem is not as big. See, here's one of the things about this quote-unquote systemic racism. The fact is, Hollywood, one of the most liberal entities in the world, Hollywood is partly to blame for this. And you know who is a part of Hollywood that is to blame for this? Black comedians. Black comedians. They have stirred the stereotype pot more than anyone. Anyone. And I said this a long time ago. I don't care if you're talking about white people or black people or Asian or women or men. There's always some truth to stereotypes. That's how they got out. That's how they emerge. But you can thank the comedians for taking it to an extreme, and you can thank the inner city for fighting with the cops and doing the violence that they do. Look at Chicago. Look at this weekend alone in Chicago. This weekend, an 8-year-old girl killed, 3 others injured after shots fired into a vehicle. I was downtown Chicago a couple of days after, and I mean, it wasn't a bad area, but there was a shooting there. Another one the next day down the street. Several people killed. The fact is, I've said this 1,000 times. Racism will always exist. Oppression will always exist to an extent. Hatred will always exist. You will never be able to get rid of it. Just like guns in the hands of bad people. You can outlaw guns, bad people will still get them. You can outlaw hate speech, people will still hate. You cannot change that. What you can do and what we should be doing is proving to this new generation of people, and people, the inner city is going to be very difficult to clean up. I'm going to be honest with you. You got to start with young people. You got to bring them along, help them understand that they are empowered. It doesn't matter if you're black or white or woman or man or whatever. If you want to be something, be it. But that's not what's preached. That's not what's preached to the black community in the inner city. It's not what's preached to the black community from Hollywood. It's not what's preached to the black community from Washington, D.C. or any of the states where the Democrats exist. Now, it seems like if you were listening to this, you never listened to it before, you would think, well, this guy, he's a hardcore right guy, and, he is conservative and Republican, and he's going to insult the Democrats. Look, this is what I'm trying to show you. This is what I'm trying to tell you. As I go through the headlines, I've been watching the headlines since all last week, and on my drive, and now I'm researching here for the show today. All you have to do is sit back and look. Add it up. It's not Trump. Can you not get that through your head? It's not systemic racism. Can you not get that through your head? It's not a far right white people. It's the Democrat Party. They're causing all of this. They've caused all of it. The inner city is a result of them. It's a result of leftist ideology. It doesn't work. And moreover, it was created and is managed, and the things are going the way they are by the Democrat Party so that they can break the Constitution. This is not me being some kind of tinfoil hat. Anybody that takes a step back and look at what's happening can see. They can see these riots that occur. They don't do anything to change anything. They're not rioting in Chicago where an 8-year-old girl was killed. An 8-year-old girl. But it was black on black violence. And they're not going to do anything about that. That very fact that is the way it is shows you they're not going to change anything. It's not a police problem. It's not a police problem. It is a leftist problem. Now, let me just say this, because I know how the media and the tech people and all these leftists, I know how they work. They're going to go back and they're going to listen to it. They're going to show this eventually one day. Let's say I run for office. They're going to say, he was on his podcast and he was saying, Brian, that's my Brian Stelter, except I got these big idiot teeth. That's what Brian Stelter has. And so they would say something like, on his podcast, the day after Labor Day in 2020, he was saying that racism doesn't exist, or he's saying that whatever they're going to say, whatever they're going to quote me on there. This is a fact. It's a fact. All you got to do, I challenge you, be very careful. Go to the inner city wherever you live. Look around. There's not white racists out there doing stuff to prevent people from becoming something. It's the Democrat Party. Go talk to people. They're angry because they think they're oppressed. They're angry because they're poor. I grew up poor. That is a real thing. But it doesn't mean that you have to stop and not achieve. But they're told that they can't. And who tells them that? The Democrat Party. The liberal teacher unions. Now, I want to kind of tag on to that a little bit about the real problems. And I can go through. Listen, I can go through the news. If you tuned into this podcast because you want to hear what the news is, I advise you just go look at Fox, go look at Drudge, go look at CNN. You're going to see the reality. I talk about this all the time. The stories, you can tell where the narrative is by the way the stories are written. I mean, they're trying to. I'm hardly even covering this nonsense about Trump saying that the troops or whatever he was saying. I pull these stories up, and it's just, you look at the AP, everybody thinks AP, Associated Press, is like this real newsy thing. But they're running with these stories that are completely fabricated. If a story does not have real sources that they tell you, don't believe it. Carl Bernstein, the reporter that was responsible for the investigative reporter was for breaking the Watergate story that took down Richard Nixon. He was talking to Brian Stelter, the freaking idiot. How this guy makes it and gets his own show, and they actually pump him up, and people believe it is beyond me. I mean, I've been around. I've told the story a million times. I won't go over it again, but he's a joke. Brian Stelter is a joke of a human being and a joke of a reporter. But he was talking about Carl Bernstein, who's another one of these weirdos that wrote a book about Trump, and it's all crap. He said almost all 200 of our stories about Watergate were based on anonymous sourcing. Yes, that is true. That is true. And their main source was an FBI agent, okay, which right off the bat, now seeing what I see about media, having been in media now for 6 going on 7 years since I got out of the FBI, and looking at the way the media uses anonymous sources, I don't even know what the facts are about Watergate. I don't know what the facts are about any of this stuff when you look back on it. Because if I'm to look at Carl Bernstein himself now, I see a liar. I see a media manipulator. I see a person who fabricates their own truth. Look at Carl Bernstein. You'll see the same thing. And for him to say that 200 of his stories that he wrote about Watergate were based on anonymous sourcing, which was one source basically, which was an FBI agent that was talking to the media. So obviously, I'll be honest with you, I've never done research on Deep Throat. That's the FBI agent that was their source. But I haven't been in the FBI now. I'd like to know a lot more about this guy who recently died, because this sounds exactly like somebody in the DOJ would do now, which I'm sure this sourcing, this anonymous sourcing that the Atlantic is using, the one that wrote this story about President Trump saying that he called the troops ignorant and losers or something like that. It's so ridiculous. I don't even feel comfortable saying it. But if you knew who these people were in the DOD, which I'm pretty sure that's probably where they're from, whoever these quote unquote sources, if they even exist, they obviously don't like the president. They obviously are leftists. I mean, again, he's a far right guy, and this podcast is far right. You know what this podcast is? It's the truth. And when you look at the totality of the circumstances, when you look at the totality of the evidence, when you look at somebody like Brian Stelter or Carl Bernstein, and you look at the totality of their actions now, what do you see? Corruption. You see liars. And when I look at these stories, listen, the president is the Teflon Don. They're not going to hurt anybody that believes this nonsense. What they sourced, or they on the AP, or this was actually CNN. No, it was on the AP. They're talking about veterans. They're saying that veterans are divided about reports Trump disparaged the military. I have not talked to one veteran that even gave that story a second thought. I could see these leftist groups of some veterans. They take leftist veterans, they all get together, they start a PAC or they start a group, and then they get leftists in there who go online and they're lying about the reality of their service. Many of them, they're Iraqi war veterans, global war on terrorism veteran. They never did anything. They were just over in Afghanistan. I'm not talking about in the field. They're like literally flew in and landed at the airport or in Iraq and never left. So it's a bullcrap story. It's a bullcrap story, a bullcrap headline. But I will give some, listen, I posted something today or yesterday. I posted about, there was a story that somebody put on Facebook, came from a real media source, which I don't even know what that means, but they were talking about how in New Jersey, it was either Parks and Recreation or one of the agencies there was pulling down the flags off of overpasses. Because a lot of people around the country have put flags up on the overpasses. When you drive under them, you see the American flag up there. Patriotic. Great. Not New Jersey. And there's a picture. It looked like the state troopers, and I tagged the New Jersey state troopers in the tweet and then put that on all my other Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And then several people actually came on and said, that's not New Jersey state troopers. And the officers, well, one person said that the picture of the officers were them putting the flags back up. Now, I don't know if I haven't found that to be credible. Because if the state's saying they're going to take them down, they're going to get them taken down. But here's what I said. I posted under all those tweets. I went ahead and retweeted, and then I posted underneath it on the other social media platforms saying that I'm going to let it stand as a warning to law enforcement. I've said this before publicly. I'll say it again. If you swore an oath to the Constitution and you're in an official position and you find yourself doing things that are unethical, and you've striven to be an ethical officer of the law, and now you're being asked to do things that are ethically questionable, and you do it, it's no different than if you just did it yourself. If somebody else tells you to pull a flag down, and there's no law against it, which there shouldn't be any law against it, and you go do it, or for instance, Ted Nugent wanted to fly into New York, play the national anthem for a Back to Blue rally that I was at speaking, and then he was going to fly back out. He wasn't going to stay there. There's no law. Even the mandates in New York say that you can fly in, be there for 24 hours, and then leave, and you won't have to quarantine. But the Nassau County Executive and the governor of New York sent police officers down to the plane and would not let him get off, and said if he got off, he'd be arrested. Now, that is unethical, illegal, and for the police officers that did it, that would have been a defining moment for me. I don't pension be damned. I don't care. You're going to die one day, and you're going to sit back and realize that you are one of the reasons why the country slipped away. So I let that post stand about that story, even though people are saying that's not New Jersey State Troopers. That wasn't the point of my post. The point of the post is, if you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and then you find yourself being ordered to do unethical things or illegal things, and you don't say no, especially if it's several of you, it's no different than if you just did it on your own. It's unethical, it's immoral, and it's a violation of your oath of office, of official duty. And here's what's going to happen. Now, I know cops are getting heat from the left, and they're getting blamed for everything, but those people are never going to back you. The people on the right, the conservatives, the constitutionalists, these people stand with law enforcement. But if you keep doing this stuff, you're not going to get that support. It's going to go away. Then you're going to be left with those people that are asking you to forcing you to do unethical things. And you're going to start to justify what you're doing. And then you're going to be no different than Hitler's brown shirts. You're going to be no different than any other henchman. There's another thing happening in Nassau County where they're wanting to have September 11th celebrations. And not only do they tell them no, but police are putting out warnings. If they do these celebrations, they're going to be arrested for remembering 9/11 in New York. Folks, this is no joke. This is absolutely the most tyrannical things that we have seen since the British occupied this nation in 1700. It's no joke. If you are liberal and you're listening to this, it is no joke. You may see the way things should be done a little differently than me. You'd be surprised. You probably don't. Ultimately, when we look at what a solution is, you'll start to see that liberal and conservative, those are political statements. But true effective decisions and solutions don't rest on an ideological left or right. It either works or it doesn't. Take healthcare, for instance. I would love for everybody in this nation to be able to go to a doctor whenever they want, even if they don't have money. But we've privatized healthcare, and we've made it into, America is not the only place that's done this. It's all over the world, but it's a business. It's not just about some ethical oath that doctors take because they want to save lives. It's a business. But even if we wanted to give free health care, it's never going to happen. You're going to bankrupt the country. You're going to force businesses to do things that ethically and legally the country can't do. And you're also going to start, listen, I could go into all this stuff. The reality is it's not going to work. It's not going to work unless doctors and nurses and hospitals start volunteering time and giving away services to the poor and helping out other people that need a little help in reducing their bills. That's not going to happen. No business will do that. You can't go to McDonald's and say, I'm poor and I'm hungry, and McDonald's will say, well, I'll give you a discount on this burger. It's not going to happen. And to the people who run hospitals, their service is just a hamburger. It's just a way to make money. I wish that wasn't the case. And I'm sure there's probably something we can do in this country. But it's not the way, it's not nationalized health care. But the point of this whole thing, or what I'm trying to say about this is, if you're liberal and I'm conservative, that's what we politically lean one way or the other. Effective solutions actually have way less to do with that than you would think if you're liberal. I mean, I'm slow to change. I don't want to change it fast. I want to figure it out right. But when we look at the Democrat Party, they aren't about solutions. Anytime a Democrat politician says change, hope and change, or we got your solutions. They're lying to you. It's a lie. Same thing really with establishment Republicans. We think Obama is terrible and his health care is terrible. And then 7 years later, they had nothing to give this new president when Trump came in. They had nothing to give him. They didn't have a solution for it. They didn't even have a solution to get rid of it. Why? Because they all thought Hillary Clinton was going to get elected. And they were going to jump on her bandwagon. That's the reality of the extreme establishment in Washington, D.C. But what I'm trying to get to cops, okay, is that we're in a war here. If you don't see that this country is at war already, you're crazy. I had a Democrat congressman that didn't like what I had to say in Will County. He's an Illinois congressman. And he did not like it all because the name of the speech was, "Are You Prepared?" And so I've tweeted at him, and I've been retweeting it every day. I forgot to retweet it, but the tweet said, "Empowering Americans apparently worries Illinois Congressman Representative Bill Foster so much he contacted media to complain about my speech to the Will County Republican Committee concerning awareness and how we, the people, prepare for leftist violence." Sorry, Congressman, the truth is right. That's what I wrote. This is what gets under their skin. When you tell the truth, we are at war. And law enforcement, if you don't get it, if you don't realize it, you are going to be used to do things. Now, I'm not talking about stuff like what happened to George Floyd. You're going to be used to do things like pull the American flag down. When good, hardworking Americans stand up and say, we're tired of it, you will be on the other side defending the unethical, murderous leaders like Cuomo, like they did with Ted Nugent. He just wanted to come in and play the national anthem, for goodness sakes. And he was threatened with arrest by these officers. I cannot even remotely support what they did. Now, the American people as well, listen, I just in general, they're starting to wake up a little bit. As I'm going around the country, I'm seeing people, they're literally asking me, what do we do? What do we do? I'm still working on that. But people are also, they're being caught up in this stuff that's happening so much that the worry is overshadowing stuff like China, how China is still a growing threat, and how China and how Joe Biden's relationship with China, they're completely overlooking that. It's something that even the liberals are overlooking this, and how dangerous China is. The Democrat Party completely discounted the threat that Iran has. And now we don't even talk about that anymore. We don't even talk about it. So as I close the show out here, I just want you to consider this. As I go around the country and I'm talking to people, what I'm starting to see is that the American citizenry, both left and right, Democrat, Republican, they're starting to realize that these riots that are happening, they're not solving anything. And they're also realizing that they're only happening as an excuse to cause violence, to accost people, and to cause chaos. And it's causing the American people to ask this question: what do we do? They're worried and they're concerned, and that focus from the worry and concern is pushing the American people into one mind. That is where we need to be. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.